Hi friends, so now we have already learned about precipitation reaction. Now just I'll remind you that in precipitation that was soluble antigen mixes with an antibody to give insoluble precipitate. Once again it is soluble antigen, but in agglutination it is insoluble antigen mixes with antibody and you have clumps, that is agglutination. So insoluble antigen mixes with antibody to form clumps in agglutination, and mainly which antibody is involved? IgM antibody is involved in agglutination rather than IgG antibody. And in agglutination, which is more better, agglutination or precipitation? Definitely agglutination is more better. It's easily visible, also more sensitive. Then in agglutination also you have slide agglutination test and tube agglutination test. So the typical example, Widal test, which we are doing for enteric fever. Okay, so you have to remember 3 points, that is cold agglutination test we are doing for mycoplasma, standard agglutination test is done for brucellosis, and microscopic agglutination test is done for leptospirosis. So here in agglutination reaction the principle is same, that means the lattice formation where you have the optimum concentration of antigen antibody, there is the zone of equivalence, and in this case there is something called complications of agglutination. That actually depends on the antibody, the nature of the antibody, the concentration of the antibody. So when you say about the concentration of antibody, when the antibody is excess, there will be no agglutination, especially when you are doing tube agglutination test. So in that case you will have to dilute so that agglutination will occur. That is, we say Poisson phenomenon. And another thing is the blocking antibody. We actually mean incomplete antibody, just like RH antibody. In that case, even if that antibody has bind to the antigen, what happens? There is no clumps are formed because it is an incomplete antibody. So that is the two complications of agglutination. Like RH antibody, there is anti-brucellosis antibody is also incomplete antibody. Okay, so that is what we mean blocking antibody. So considering this incomplete antibody, we have another antigen antibody interaction, another, that is Coombs test. Again it has two types, direct, indirect. So direct Coombs test is to detect fetal RH antibodies. Indirect Coombs test is done for maternal antibodies. One more difference, direct is done in vivo, indirect is done in vitro. So now let us take, okay, before example, here there is something called Coombs serum. What is actually Coombs serum? We know that in our body we have globulin antibodies, that's actually gamma globulin in nature, we know that. So when you give this globulin, gamma globulin is injected to a goat, some antibodies are produced in its body. What is that? Against this globulin, so it is anti-globulin. Simple. So that is what we actually mean Coombs serum here. Okay. So if a mother is RH negative and the father is RH positive, so their child, they already had a first child which was RH positive. So there is a chance that the mother gets sensitized. In order to check whether if she is sensitized or if she have the Rh antibodies in her blood. For that we will take her blood, which may or may not contain Rh antibodies. Okay, and we have to tag these antibodies so that we are adding O positive blood to that, so that if Rh antibodies is present in her blood, what happens? It will bind to this RBC. Actually we are doing this in a laboratory, so that means what we are actually doing, we are detecting the maternal antibody. So indirect Coombs test is done in vitro. Okay, what happens next? The Rh antibodies, if present, suppose let's imagine it was present, so that means those antibody will definitely bind to the RBCs present in the O positive blood group. What happens next? Will there be clumps? No, because since it is an incomplete antibody, so now we have to add Coombs sera, then the lattice is complete, so that agglutination occurs immediately. So this is actually indirect Coombs test, and in case of direct Coombs test you will do this in vivo, that is to detect fetal antibody. Okay,